Good evening. Welcome to Come Together. Hello, Janet, Julie, Kathy, Marilyn, and Margaret. So wonderful to see everyone. Welcome to Come Together on this is the fourth Thursday. So thanks for the flexibility. We moved one week from the normal week that we are together and enjoying this wonderful. I hope everyone's had a chance to see some of the wonderful fall colors that we have this year. What a gift it is. Uh, Fall is one of my favorite times of the year, and I hope that you're enjoying this as we enter into this fall season. Good morning, Kim and Kathy. Good morning, David. Welcome, everyone, to Come Together. Now, this is a celebration of our third year that we've been doing Come Together. And so thanks for showing up. And as we formatted our gathering a little differently today, and we're just excited. Our team, um, Lana and Jen and Dan, just wonderful to have everyone with us today. Good morning, David, Marilyn, and Linda, Chris. Welcome to Come Together. Oh. And I've asked people what's their favorite thing about the fall season. It might be nice if we would put in the chat, what's your favorite thing about fall? A couple of people that I asked that question to, some people talked about baseball. It's excited here in Minnesota with the Twins baseball team. Other people have mentioned other sports. But the dominant thing that people have celebrated here uh, in Minnesota has been the fall colors. This, I think, right now they're in their peak. So, if you would please just put in the chat, what it is that excites you or deepens you as you uh, are entering into this fall season that we're in. Again, thank you to everyone for if there was an adjustment that you made that we changed our gathering this month to a week later than we typically have, and hope that that's working out for all of you. Good evening, Don. It's so good to see you. Yeah. Kendra, welcome. Jill. Dan always does such a great job of selecting just the perfect music for us to gather around. Yeah. Yeah. Again, my name is Kelly Chatman, or Pastor Kelly PK. Just wonderful to be with you. And I'm the director for the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement, gathered with our wonderful staff this evening. Lana and Jen and Dan and Rachel and AD will be joining us on our staff as some of our staff that are blessed to be joining you and convening our come together this evening. And again, we're excited that we've tweaked the format a little bit. Hopefully that we'll be able to hear more from you, and recognizing that we're really blessed that there are those who are gathering with us from all over the country as well, from Rhode Island and Oregon and California, Canada. And so it's just as we share our concerns, our deep desire for beloved community and racial justice, that call and that desire transcends our boundaries and brings us together in a common hope. In addition to maybe just what excites you, enlivens you about the fall, you might also share your name or your pronouns and where you're coming from. If you'd share that in the chat as we gather this evening, and we center ourselves as people of hope and commitment to racial justice. Well, again, we our initial plan was we were going to have a wonderful artist, Robert Coleman. That plan didn't quite come to fruition. And so that opened up the vision and the possibility of trying something new. Again, celebrating that this is the third year of our come together and a time to reflect on some of where we've been and some of the amazing things that have happened in our gatherings together at the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement, or CLNE, and also in your context, how you have walked this journey over the last 3 years, and to kind of lift up, to recognize some of that, and then also imagine where we might be going, and as community together. So our format tonight is our conversation centering on welcome and centering, and then time of reflection on our CLNE, our why. What compels us? What's the driver deep inside of us that pulls us out of ourselves, out of isolation, and into relationship? And what connects us? What is your why? And then our collective why, and the reflection of our climb and how we move together, and then finally connecting asset-based mindset and then following up with our sending. And all of this will be fleshing out as we move deeper into our conversation together, our coming together. We will begin now with our land acknowledgement, centering ourselves.
As we gather tonight, asking the question, how do we build true relationships across difference? We acknowledge the sacred lands on which we stand. The Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement is located on the ancestral home of the Dakota people. We are in close proximity to the territories of the Anishinaabe and the Ho-Chunk peoples. This land has been stewarded as a living relative by the Dakota for generations. The United States government effectively stole this land from the Dakota people through a series of unjust treaties and broken promises, followed by targeted efforts of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and forced removal. For this, we repent and commit to doing better. We look now to the Dakota people and all Native American communities as examples of resilience, resistance, and strength. We are grateful to have the opportunity to learn and to work in this community on this territory. As we enter into conversations of racial justice tonight, let us remain mindful of these broken covenants and commit to building trust in all our relations.
Good morning, good day, wherever you might be around the world. I'm thankful to be invited into this space um, and to gather with you all. Some thoughts: shifting between joy and lament, relaxed shoulders and raised fists. Now that the judge has read into the public record a 3-count jury's verdict in the case of Derek Chauvin, what are we to feel? What are we to think? What are we to do? Some of us might feel relieved, eyes flooded and faces as wet as rivers, as we reflect on a reality that justice has been more of a poetic, aspirational idea rather than a material fact for the most part when it comes to redressing the harm done to Black people in the US. Some of us may feel relieved because yesterday's verdict felt like something akin to justice. So we cried, we rejoiced, we may have offered up thanks to God, to Spirit, to ancestors. Some of us have depleted our deposit of tears. I know that I wasn't sure if I could shed any more, but I did. And I wasn't sure if my face was wet from relief or because as I watched in virtual community with others who breathed a long and collective sigh, or because my sister admitted in our family group chat that she was crying as she watched. And as she watched and cried, I thought about the faith that she must summon every time her 16-year-old son Samaj leaves the house fully enraptured in his Black youthfulness, only to be read as a threat by some. Or because the loved ones of George Floyd might finally be able to rest in their grief, though how can one rest knowing that a guilty charge will never bring back their dead, their beloved? Or hold one another closely because they know how easy it is for someone to snatch away the very body that is in their grasp, and heal outside of the purview of a camera, or sleep knowing that the person who ended the life of their loved one won't slip out of the grips of accountability, like so many other police officers before him. I don't know why I cried while watching an officer of the court cuff a former law enforcement officer who killed a Black person, but I know how I felt. I felt like a driver in a vehicle that has been stuck in a traffic jam for so long, whom, after having waited with impatient patience, finally begins to move ahead with a deep awareness that further along you might come upon a traffic jam yet again. I imagine that is how many of us felt. Others felt angry still, and rightfully so, because they might recognize that there exists a form of material justice that we have yet to fully imagine and experience in the US, because the practices we employ and tactics we use are the consequence of the limitations of our moral and spiritual imaginations, which have been shaped in a country where justice looks like punishment, looks like cages, looks like cuffs, looks like policing the police after the police kills one of us, looks like more violence as a response to violence. I'm shifting between joy and lament, relaxed shoulders and raised fists, because the fact that there are few options outside of other possibilities, the greatest of which would be George Floyd still being alive. The only option then left at our disposal is our reliance on a system that itself needs to be raised. These are complicated thoughts and feelings. Imagine, if you can, a world where a sentence might result in someone like Chauvin having to commit to service over an extended period of time in the very community, on the very streets in which he took George Floyd's life. Imagine a world where Floyd's family and the community could determine the form of restitution that Chauvin would be committed to performing, a type of service that demands he bring life to the place where he once brought about a death. Imagine a world where the easy way out ain't a cage, but is replaced with the harder work of deep accountability, self-reckoning, the seeking of forgiveness, the redressing of harmful systems, and reconciliation. What are we to think and feel and do today, the day after the guilty charge rang out? It is our job to imagine differently, to use that imagination to conjure the type of transformative and just practices that might ultimately result in Black folks' aliveness and the abolition of all that keeps us from having life, whether it be anti-Black racism, prisons, or police. I want a future where justice is not violence refashioned as beauty, as a cage, in a world where Black death is not a requirement for any of it. I want a future where 2 hours or so after we might shed tears, because of the conviction of one officer who killed a Black person, we won't discover that a 16-year-old Black girl is killed and find ourselves impatiently patient in the traffic jam yet again. May it be. May it be. For Micaiah Bryant. Thank you.
We want to give thanks for the powerful reflection from Darnell, who lifts up a vision about a world that may it be. And with our come together this evening, we wanted to start with the journey of CLNE, the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement, that really began long before the murder of George Floyd. When I moved to Chicago, I moved to Minneapolis from Chicago, and my wife and I received the assignment to serve as a pastor in North Minneapolis, where I served for 20 years. And when I arrived in Minneapolis from Chicago, and I began serving at the congregation in the Harrison neighborhood, I was really surprised that when I watched television, the framing of North Minneapolis and communities that were defined by Black and marginalized community, I was always framed as the negative. If there was a gunshot in North Minneapolis, it was lifted up and promoted, exaggerated, and all of those things. And I was really surprised at the preponderance of that narrative about how bad North Minneapolis was. And so as I began as a pastor there, and that framing, I really kept thinking about Martin Luther King and how he talked about beloved community, and wanted to really focus on not that narrative that was diminishing of community and people of color, but looking at the brilliance and the life that was there. And so we began doing, we did things like there was a popcorn shop across from the church that I served. And the popcorn shop was dormant. And so we rented that popcorn shop as an opportunity to gather beyond the walls of the church. And we started doing children's programming in that. And the children, they renamed the popcorn shop the Popcorn Palace, or the Peace Palace. And so it was just a wonderful thing. And I remember one story, there were 3 little girls, they were from Mexico, and they were in foster care and living in the neighborhood. And one day, one of the little girls said to the young woman who was our youth director, the little girl asked her, "Is this a church or magical place?" And so thinking about that reframing and imagination of a neighborhood, a city, a place that really builds on the assets of the community and not the deficits. So really turning that around. And so we began to really look at the neighborhood as a place of welcome, safety, and belonging beyond the walls of the church. That messaging that everyone would be welcome. And so doing things like neighborhood cookouts and block parties and ways for neighbors to gather both inside and beyond the walls of the church. And so that was really the impetus for addressing the challenge that erupted around not just George Floyd, but Philando Castile, and just so many ways that, and actually we discovered that there was a map from the city planning in 1933. In that city planning map, it described neighborhoods like Harrison and North Minneapolis, near North. It described them as, on that map, it displayed them as Negro slums. And then it had neighborhoods like Kenwood and suburban communities, and described them as Gold Coast. And so that framing of disparity went back to city planning, mapping as far back as 1932. So 90 years of that framing that in some ways continues today. And so when we think about North Minneapolis or 38th in Chicago, or the disparities, they're so rooted. And so that's kind of the beginning of CLNE, where we really, prior to the pandemic or the murder of George Floyd, we had advocated to our bishop, to social service agencies, to really focus on the challenge in North Minneapolis, in the city. Has really been white flight in so many churches and leaders that have moved out of the city. And so CLNE really began as a challenge and an invitation for a reinvestment in the city, and to demythologize the negativity and the disparities that it had been known for so long. But really, it wasn't until the murder of George Floyd, or the death of Philando Castile, that awakening began to happen in our communities, that racism really is a problem. So that was the beginning of CLNE, and our focus was really around relationship building, a beloved community that Martin Luther King had lifted up, and a picture of so many others that have said, to demythologize that deficit thinking that really is the foundation of racism, in our community and in our world. And so CLNE really began, and was birthed out of this desire and this strategy around welcome, safety, and belonging, a common unity that we share, and building on that. And so, beloved community, and being able to see things like a church or a popcorn shop as a magical place, a community, redefining how we are, and the potential to live together, in ways that break that cycle, that we have been so captured by. So that's the beginning of the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement. And wondering, in your context, what are ways that you are addressing that? And kind of the question is, what is your why? The why for the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement was to demythologize that message of separation and deficit, that so much cuts us off. So we invite you now, to 15 minutes to enter into breakout time, right, where it's a time that I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do this, if one of our staff was going to explain this part. So,
PK, you get to say whatever you want.
okay.
But if you like some help, so what we like to do in these small groups is just to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak, and it's a spirit of openness and reflection and respect. So what we'd ask you to do, as you look at this very important question of what is your why, to make sure that you introduce yourself. Chances are you won't know the other couple of people that will be in your group. Focus on listening well. Sometimes our focus is on what we're going to say, but I would challenge you and invite you to think about listening, and spend all of your energy there. Make sure you're hearing from each person in the group. You're going to have 15 minutes, and sometimes it takes a while to get into what's your why, but I would ask you all to pay attention to the time, and to make sure everyone gets to be heard, and to speak from your own experience using I statements. So pay attention to how these things are coming out of your mouth. It's really easy to slip into generalities and you language, but try to stick to I. That's where the why comes from. So with those as guidelines, we're going to invite you to be in small groups for 15 minutes. And when we come back, we'll probably look forward to hearing from some of you. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Out, all right. in the
Can I
Thank
get
you.
back in my
Yeah,
group?
I think it's
Can I
great.
can I get back in my group? I forgot. I left them abruptly in the middle of somebody talking. I didn't realize that.
It's not letting us send you back, but you'll
Oh,
meet with the groups one more time.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Hi, Don. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Kelly.
We're about to reconvene anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know that. It came up on the screen and I just impulsively clicked on it.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Wasn't the eject button? Like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Janet, so good to see you.
Yeah, and I've been trying to make these, and I'm just so glad that I caught at least part of your explanation of CLE, and we do have to get together. And here, I want to dive in a little bit more.
Well, we'll make it happen, and I will be at the open house coming up. Is that in a week? With the new
NAS
NAS
open
Center.
house, yes.
Congratulate Sandra for me.
You're going to be impressed, I think.
Yeah.
Can you just apologize to me for my group? I mean, I really left. They were actually answering my question.
Okay. Well, you'll have opportunity in a second, Don.
Okay.
So that was one of three. We're going to have three breakouts. So
Okay.
uh,
To the same group?
yeah, so you'll get to lead them again.
Okay.
How are we doing for time?
I think we're doing just fine. We've got time to do a little bit of discussion, hearing out what some of the gems were from the small group discussions, and then we can move to our next topic.
Right. Oh, so are we back from the small groups?
We are. Everybody.
Oh, wonderful. Well, welcome back, everyone. Yeah. Well, this would be just a wonderful time to share any reflection. If anybody like abandoned your group in the middle of a question, anything like that. So again, we love to hear a reflection or two from your group discussion.
I see Bobby has her hand up.
Yeah.
Bobby, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted us to write it in the chat or you want us to talk in this fashion, or I saw something about writing our reflections in the chat. Is that what you wanted us to do, or do you want us to talk?
If you don't mind talking, that would be great.
Okay. Well, I think we can all three of us in our group had some shared ideas. Mainly, we are all aware of what has happened in the past, and we all want to be part of a change, which we understand doesn't happen overnight. But we talked about one of our members had read a book called Christianity Without Dogma, and that was Don. And that resonated with both Kendra and me, because we think it is really important, not so much exactly what we all believe, but how we behave. And many of us may be Christians or call ourselves Christians, but Christianity is really more about moving out into the community and serving our neighbor and becoming one with them. More about that than about the dogma, rules and regulations and that sort of thing. So I think that's a lot of what we talked about. And we also talked about the fear that we have of some of these big, huge mega churches that seem to be more interested in white supremacy or, making it okay to be extremely prosperous and making you feel okay about that. Although I have to admit there's one church that's supposedly coming to Plymouth, one of the suburbs next to where I live, and I'm suspect of this church. I don't really know. I can't honestly say. I've never been to one of their services, but it scares me a lot because I am afraid that they're not so interested in community. I'm afraid that they may be interested in numbers of people who join their church. And that is not the direction I want us to go. And I don't think any of the people here would want us to go in that direction. So I will stop here and let somebody else speak.
Yes, and if thank you. And anything that you can lift up on, again, your why, like what compels you to invest in beloved community, or in your aspiration for what was reflected in your small group conversation.
Carol has her hand up.
Go ahead,
Well, we
Carol.
had a variety of people who had like somebody for whom this was a first time attender, and somebody who's been here a few times. But I wanted to share that I was inspired to connect what's happening in CLNE with what I discovered the ELCA is doing to prepare a social statement on faith and civic life to be presented to the next assembly. So I have worked with small groups with materials from that preparation and have had really fruitful discussions with how do you respectfully engage with people with whom you disagree at times to develop an active community of moral deliberation and action. And I did bring CLNE in as an example of such a group in our discussions. And we have had some intense small group discussions, and we'll actually be doing that at our adult forum on Sunday, or on Sunday and Monday this weekend. But I thought it really the aims of CLNE are very compatible with with the direction of that study. And some of the members who participated said, "Oh, I didn't know that I didn't realize that the Lutheran Church wanted us to be involved in the community." I mean, it's interesting that would come up, but I thought that was something I would like to share.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol. Before we move on, I want to give testimony to, after the murder of George Floyd, Don Samuels assembled a number of people, but he pretty much did it on his own back. For a month, he put up two tents along Broadway, and simply invited people to come and pray, sit for, then it was maybe 8 minutes and 29 seconds before he had the correct account. But it was gathering community to sit and be present with one another. And then I'm smiling because then during the Derek Chauvin trial, Don again gathered a number of people, and CLNE was blessed to be up with that assembly. And he did a virtual each day or throughout the Derek Chauvin trial, in the midst of all the disruption, and knowing that that Minneapolis would be on a national stage. Again, a half an hour of time of meditation, prayer, and reflection leaders and music. So for 79 consecutive days, just coming together and centering ourselves as community. And what makes me really want to lift that up is also that included rabbis, imams, pastors, bishops, and in that period of time, it was Ramadan, it was Passover, and it was Easter. And so when we think about looking at how we move together as community beyond the tribes or different faiths groups, really coming together. So again, thank you. So when we think about our why, and our whys transcend the boundaries and the differences. So thank you for your reflection. So one of the things that we and is talking about the how we gather. And one of the gifts that at CLNE that we really focus on is called asset-based community development. And it's a strategy, it's a methodology that really centers on the positives and the gifts. Not that there are not deficits, but we're choosing to focus on the assets of community, because what racism does, what stigmatization does, it devalues some and lifts up others, right? In terms of it privileges some and this diminishes others. So I'm going to introduce you to asset-based community development as a core value with CLNE.
No sound. We have no sound.
Well, that had to happen. Just one moment, please. Yep. My apologies. Let's take it from the top.
Welcome to CLNE's Introduction to Asset-Based Community Development. Wherever we are, there is always opportunity to build on a community's health and wellness. As community builders, we can choose a glass half empty or half full approach for how we respond to community problems and potentials. A glass half empty focus is called needs-based organizing. In needs-based organizing, the community is seen as a consumer that is looking for a person or business to supply a solution. The work in needs-based organizing is focused on the deficits in the community and operates from a response to a problem through a charity lens. Needs-based organizing has a high emphasis on social service programs and focuses on the individual. Community members are seen as clients that need to be fixed. In a needs-based approach, the goal is to supply effective maintenance by creating programs to address the deficit. A glass half full approach is known as asset-based community development. It is sometimes called ABCD and focuses on the skills and strengths found in the community itself. An asset-based approach doesn't ignore or deny the needs and challenges facing a community, but it looks to build on what is already present by making connections and engaging every community member as a leader who has something to offer the work to make that community stronger. The asset-based approach focuses on possibilities and determines opportunities for change through local community input. ABCD connects community skills and potential together in a shared investment for collaboration and partnerships. The work is built within community associations. This includes local businesses, neighborhood networks, churches, entrepreneurs, cooperatives, local leaders, youth, and elders. ABCD makes it possible for people to become the producers within a community and empowers change by centering the community as the answer. Through asset-based community development, we learn to see ourselves and each person around us as someone with unique strengths and leadership potential to bring about community change. The possibilities are endless when we see each other as co-creators in cultivating the health and wellness we want to see in our communities.
Yeah, thank you. So as we think about this, asset-based community development is more than a way to lead, it's a way to live. We like to think about translating asset-based community development as being co-creators with God, co-creators with one another, and how we accompany each other, not to come in and fix people, but to partner with one another in community. And I think Healing Our City is a wonderful example of that. In the midst of all of the disruption, smoke billowing, overheads, buildings smoldering, to have a place to come and gather as community and to celebrate being together, to hold on to hope. So I don't really have the language for it, but to be able to see the assets within our community and not just continue to build on or see the deficits, because the deficits, that map from 1932 was to frame neighborhoods for their deficits. And so often our city planning, our theology, in so many ways, we have to be conscious of how we're framing and how we see people and how we perpetuate seeing people and communities as problems rather than co-creators and being beneficiaries of our community action. So what we're going to do is invite you. We'll now be going in our small groups for 20 minutes and continue our conversation. And I'll throw it back to you, Dan.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're actually going to do 15 minutes. That's okay, just so we have a chance to hear from people after the groups. But the same, you're going to be, hopefully, most of you will be in the same groups that you were in. So you can build on your knowledge of each other and your relationships that you started tonight. And the questions you have here, and if you get pressed for time, why don't you just choose one that means the most to you, that you feel like you can really answer from the heart. When have you found yourself having a deficit-based mindset? Always a challenge. When have you experienced the fruits of an asset-based mindset? And what might an asset-based mindset look like in your context? So you can think about which one of those you might want to discuss, or you can have time to do all three of them in your groups. All right, Lana, you good? Here we go. Welcome back, everyone. We put up on the slide here, it's a version of the questions you all were discussing, but we'd like to be able to close out. We've got about 15 minutes left and thought we would close out with hearing, what would you share about what asset-based thinking or asset-based community development would look like in your context? What would that look like? If you have questions that have come up for you or came up in your discussions, we'd love to hear about them. And then also, just for our sake, what would you be interested in talking about and exploring next month? So wherever you want to go with that, but we want to end, thinking about asset-based thinking, asset-based mindsets.
And this is a time for sharing it. We'd love to hear from as many people as possible. And I want to especially invite Evelyn, who is here from Rhode Island. Where do you find assets? How does that work in your context?
Evelyn's our spokesperson.
Ah,
Um, for me, so I'm an RA at a university here in Rhode Island. So for me, what I do is we have a bunch of different communities on campus. It's very diverse, and so it's kind of hard to make everyone feel included all the time. But what I like to do is I provide resources to kids to find different communities and clubs and organizations around campus that are not only like identity based, but also things that you enjoy being involved in. So making sure, even though, so no matter who you are, how you identify, or what your race is, that you have a home and that you have people who you can relate to. So I use the assets around campus of these clubs that are run by students primarily who are their age, to kind of have like my residents, the people that I live with, find a community that they can be a part of it with.
oh. Ellen, thank you. I think about in your context, being a resident advisor at a university, how it translates so well. One that we really look at and emphasize is welcome, safety, and belonging, right? And that if we communicate that everybody's welcome, everybody's safe, and everybody belongs, that's a core value that builds on the assets of who doesn't desire to feel welcome, who doesn't desire to feel safe, and who doesn't desire to belong. So that's such a strength, and what a great position you're in to communicate that as a resident advisor. What are some other reflections that come out of your assets in your context?
Don's got his hand up.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Sandra and I are in a unique position in that we moved into the North Minneapolis to help to make a difference. And right away, the second week we were here, a bullet came through our baby's bedroom window. The baby wasn't born yet, but the crib was in there. And so it was almost like a bullet was tied to a pigeon, and the pigeon delivered the message through the window to say safety is what you need to get involved in. And so we took that to be that indication of what was needed, and so that immediately led to a whole series of things, and we started to organize our block club, and that's led to something else. And it was always, we didn't know what we came here for. We had no idea what to do, but it was like the message came from the community, sometimes violently, sometimes directly. When you are, I tell you, when you are a professional person living in a low-income community, it becomes very easy to not be asset-based because you have ideas. You're a mover and a shaker, right? You're a corporate type. You don't sit around waiting for silly meetings, right? And then you have people, you're trying to bring people together who have never come together before, and they're reluctant to talk, and so it requires enormous amount of patience. And so I think asset-based for me is patience-based, because you have to die, literally. You have the ideas. Hey guys, here's what we're going to do. And you have the ideas, but they're not the community's ideas. And you have to set that aside and slow down. And because your idea is not gonna fly, it's gonna die. It might be a good idea, but it's a bad way to lead or to share or to, yeah.
Thank you.
Well said, Don.
Uh,
My name is Carl, and I want you to run for office again, okay?
Thank you. I will.
All right. Thank you. We need you. We need you.
Thank you.
The only thing I'm going to say is that I really look at this ABCD approach as being somewhat disingenuous, in the sense that you get together with a bunch of people and you think about the assets in the community. Well, you don't go home then. You don't decide to, okay, look at that. We've got these assets in the community, or we've got these assets in this room. There's always then looking at the deficit to address the deficit once you've got the assets identified. So to suggest that ABCD is the be all and end all, it's not. It's only the beginning.
Yes, Kendra.
I was just thinking of the context of asset-based. When you're thinking of wanting to work with community, rather than thinking of what they need help with, maybe recognizing that they probably already have some strengths within their community, and that they're already doing the work that you might think they need to do. May not look the way that you're thinking, but especially if you're a white person going into a community of color, or a historically marginalized community, and you live with privilege, it's better to assume that there is already work being done in those communities, rather than these are people who are waiting for you to show up with your great ideas and change the day. So I think for me, that's what it's all about, like that assumption that there's already work being done. These folks already know what they need and are working on that. And your job is to come in and say, how can I help uplift what you're already doing?
Thank you, Kendra. I see a lot of shaking heads. So let's, what's going on inside those shaking heads? Come on, AD. We love hearing from young people too. So.
Yeah. So, well, from our conversation, I think we talked about the nuances within asset-based community development. I think, to Carl's point, it's hard to look at a community without deficits, period, right? When you're going into, not even as a fixer, just as a regular person, right? There are things that within any community, right? Let's just put it out there. Within any community, there are things that are good, things that are bad, things that could be better, all those different things. And I think that to that point, that's true. But then in looking at the point that I don't remember the last person who spoke said, to what they said, when you're looking at a community, you're looking at what is already being done. I think that could be a good advantage, but I think that there's also lots of nuances that needs to be explored within ABCD for it to, really make more sense to all individuals, right? So, but yeah, that's my thoughts. Yeah. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you all. Because of time, we're gonna need to transition, but I would advocate that asset-based community development is the focus is really that we're co-creators, that those people and communities that we see their deficits have something to offer. And co-creation means that everybody has something to offer. And we're so framed out of our historical racism, sexism, all of those isms of focusing and seeing the deficits, where actually that negative framing underneath that are assets, or there's potential. And so the point about asset-based community development is that everybody has something to contribute. Every neighborhood has something to contribute. Every person has something to contribute. And we don't see those opportunities to contribute because we're so framed by seeing the deficits. in people, in communities, in places that just furthers that schism. And in our minds, we're actually living with those maps, just like city planning from 1932. We have those maps inside of our heads, right? We call those maps sexism, racism, all of those isms. And so and then lastly, being in relationship with one another is where we become liberated to actually see one another more authentically. And I would use the language out of my faith tradition as children of God, or in the language and the vision that Martin Luther King articulated, a beloved community. We all have value and worth. So go ahead, please, Jen.
I feel like I just need to let that sit there. That's the end. I'm just here to share what we're coming up to next at CLNE. For those of you that are part of equity or racial justice teams or have connections to those who are part of teams, we are offering our first Be the Work development workshop series, and it's going to start in November, but we're beginning the relationship and partnerships with different congregations and nonprofits now. So if you have any interest or connections with folks that might be interested, it will include 4 different workshops over the course of the next program year, moving all the way through May. And this entire experience, it includes evening workshops. It includes the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory, which is a great tool. And then having these workshops of learning that lead into action planning and building relationships with the community that comes together to learn. So we're looking forward to that. And we also hope that you will be here with us next month, because we will come together again for racial justice on October 19th.
So thank you all very much. It's wonderful to be with you all, and we look forward to our next come together October the 19th. Enjoy your fall and these wonderful colors that we have in our trees that are just blossom, that's exploding with color, right? And may our world represent those trees as well. Don, great to see you. Kristen, Carl, everyone. Don, have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Make me want to shout hallelujah. And I want to sing on. I sing on. Woo! Lord help me. Lift every voice and say,